Alright, what's going on, guys? There's been a lot of discourse going around in the community about Elden Ring's boss design. There's a lot of positive opinions and there's a lot of negative opinions, and a lot of really good takes and a lot of absolutely terrible takes, and I've been mulling this over in my head, and I gotta be honest with you guys, I think both sides are kinda right. I know people that think Elden Ring's bosses are the worst in all of the series, and for me personally, after my first playthrough, I thought they were the best. But I've played this game a lot now, and my eyes have now been opened to a lot of the game and the boss's faults. So today I want to run through a lot of the revelations I've had, and answer the big question that I've seen a lot of people talking about of, do Elden Ring's bosses kind of suck? But let me get one thing straight before I start ranting a little bit. I'm not trying to be right. I just want to offer my perspective and get you thinking a little bit to see if y'all agree or disagree with me. Because like I said, I've seen opinions all across the spectrum about these bosses, and I don't want to talk about all the things that have been said before. So here's the first thing that really stuck out to me. I really felt like the bosses suffer a little bit because this is the first Souls game that doesn't force you to learn them. Elden Ring gives you a lot of tools. As a player, you now have more means than ever to absolutely destroy the bosses and enemies in your wake. And of course, the most prominent one that I have to talk about today is spirit summons. I don't care if you use spirit summons, I don't. I used Mimic Tier back when it was really popular because I found that there was just such a jump in the difficulty of the end game. But it really opened my eyes to something, that I didn't have to learn the bosses like I did in the past. Because the spirits are very good for one thing, they split the aggro. They make it to where half the time the boss is fighting the spirit instead of you, and you can get some chip damage off, or heal or charge up a power attack without having to worry about the boss you're fighting. And what that does is rob you of the song and dance that was originally orchestrated for the game to play out. Now of course, these tools were put into the game by the developer, and I'm not trying to gatekeep, I'm just simply making an observation. But here's the thing, there is no penalty for using summons or co-op and bypassing that natural flow of the boss fight. It's the easier, faster way, and there's no reason not to except for pride. And so what this does is make the classic experience an unnecessary challenge. Now like I said, I'm not trying to tell you which is right or wrong, however I'd be lying if I didn't say there were numerous times I felt like I cheated because I used Mimic Tier, and I thought that I missed out on what could have been an extremely memorable challenge. But speaking of memory, I feel like that's what the bosses of Elden Ring cling to way too much. They feel stuck in the past. And while I think the Dark Souls games evolved boss fights with each iteration, I don't think that there's a single boss in Elden Ring that you couldn't just take and stick in Dark Souls 3 to make it feel any different. Now if I were to put a Dark Souls 3 boss in Elden Ring, it would be way too easy, because the player has so many new abilities with the Ash of War system. However, the bosses did not evolve with the player. They don't move or act in new ways. The only thing that makes them adapt to the stronger player is that they have less downtime and do a lot more damage, and it makes it feel a bit unnatural and unfair. Sekiro was a game that I think had the perfect boss design. The way the bosses fought you in that game forced you to be creative and learn the abilities of the game you were playing. You had to use different things, but there were always options to switch up your prosthesis and tackle it in a different way if you wanted to. The Demon of Hatred is a great example of this. It's a boss fight that perfectly allows you to utilize the dodge mechanic, but you also have the option to deflect if you don't want to change your playstyle. And on top of that, several different prosthetic tools can also allow the fight to play out differently. If you find it hard to dodge some of the bigger attacks, you can throw on the umbrella to stay in the pocket more. However, you also have the option to use the Malcontent Whistle to get some free stuns in. It's a boss that forces you to have learned the game's style, but then makes you put your own spin on it. I did not get this feeling with Elden Ring's bosses. While I did feel like my character had gotten more powerful, I did not feel like I had learned new ways to play this game, because I was never forced to apply them. You can roll and R1 your way all the way through Elden Ring. The bosses never force you to evolve. Every attack that's meant to be dodged by jumping can just as easily be dodged with a roll. You can go this entire game without ever jumping in a boss fight. And while the game does encourage this extra dimension of player movement with jump attacks dealing more damage, it's made them slow where the game just as easily punishes you for trying these new things. There's nothing in this game like a Makiri counter or lightning reversal that makes you think in a dimension higher than when should I roll and when should I attack. That is the formula for every single boss fight in this game. Now of course, there are different builds you can use that make certain boss fights easier. However, it's never done in a way that doesn't also punish a different playstyle. Faster bosses are going to feel much more natural with faster weapons, but this is done at the expense of people using slower weapons. For example, the Elden Beast fight is the final boss of the game, supposed to be the one fight that challenges you in every way you've experienced so far. Except it doesn't. It doesn't really force you to do anything. The entire fight can be boiled down to how quickly can you get behind its back. It doesn't really force you to jump. It would have been an excellent opportunity to incorporate Torrent, would have added a whole nother layer to the fight, but they chose not to. And if you're lucky, with a little bit of precise positioning, every attack he does will just miss. The fight does not challenge the player in any healthy way. Now let's compare this to a final boss like Ishin. Ishin makes the player reflect on everything they've learned so far. To get the most out of this fight, you have to use the Mikiri counter, jumping, dodging, deflecting, lightning reversals, and on top of that, every single prosthesis is viable in this fight. If there's a certain attack that he does that you really struggle with dodging or deflecting, there's a skill or prosthetic tool that can be used to avoid it. And on top of all of that, he can also be beaten by simply running away and getting chip damage. There is no wrong way to do this fight, but it only works because there are no efficient outs. And I know somebody's gonna say, well, that works so well because Sekiro only has one playstyle. And with all the different builds of Elden Ring, they can't afford to make it that intuitive. And I would have to strongly disagree here. There is nothing in Elden Ring that challenges the player based on the way they've evolved since Dark Souls 3. I think what really would have benefited the bosses of Elden Ring are in-fight mechanics. And what I mean by that is a little challenge on top of simply dodging the boss. And this is something that Sekiro did as well. Lightning reversals are a great example. You don't have to reflect the lightning. It can be dodged, but it's an option that if you want that extra challenge, it's going to pay off. Elden Ring has the hidden posture system, but it's a feature that rewards one playstyle while punishing another. But the final thing I want to talk about today is characterization, because I think it's the one thing in Elden Ring that is both its strongest point, but simultaneously the thing it fumbles the hardest. Because I think Elden Ring, more so than any game in the past, builds up its main bosses to make them really feel like the main players in the world. As you journey throughout Elden Ring, you really feel the demigod's influence. You understand who it is you're fighting. And the fact that the bosses talk to you during the fights and have extremely story-driven cutscenes adds an extra layer to the boss fight that is awesome. However, as you keep playing, you realize that's the one thing that gets destroyed the more you progress through the game, because you end up fighting these same characters over and over again. Now, technically we can explain it away with lore, but you really can't lie, it makes them lose their novelty. With the game having almost 100 bosses and only 9 of them being unique, it definitely does dwindle some more exciting stories that would have been a lot better had we only fought the boss one time. But this is a point that has already been expanded on to nauseam. So let me just wrap up by saying this. I don't hate Elden Ring's bosses. Like I said at the beginning, my first time through this game, I thought they were the best in the series. But now that I've fought them several times over, I can't help but shake a feeling like they're missing something invaluable. I do think that ultimately they worked for the game, at least for the first blind run, but I really hope that going forward, whether that's in an Elden Ring 2 or in future DLC, that those are bosses that feel like they only belong in Elden Ring. And I will give credit where credit's due. Radahn is probably the boss that feels the most like a truly valuable boss fight that can only be in this game. But aside from him and maybe Rykard, I have to admit that the others felt a bit lacking. But that's gonna pretty much do it for the video today. Do you agree with me, or do you think I'm kind of overthinking things? If you would like to expand on this discussion further, I invite you to join the Discord link I'll have in the pinned comment below. But aside from that, be sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe if you're new around here, and I'll catch you in the next one.